Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. I'm really excited to bring you today's video. If you enjoy my content, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. Let's get started. Vesna Vulović was born on January 3, 1950 in Belgrade, the capital of Serbia. Her family was of Serbian descent, and during the years she was born, Yugoslavia continued to exist as a socialist federation, and they led quite a modest life. Although her family's humble lifestyle did not seem to indicate that Vesna would later achieve success in her career, it laid the foundation for the strong determination and work ethic she would develop. Vesna's educational journey began at Belgrade University, where she studied sociology. However, her dreams were not limited to academic success alone. From a young age, she became interested in airplanes and the aviation industry. Young Vesna would often express her admiration for the idea of seeing airplanes and being in the sky. This dream would later guide her toward her future career. A turning point in Vesna's life came in 1971. One day, while walking around Belgrade, she heard that JAT Yugoslav Airlines was hiring airline personnel. This news marked the beginning of the realization of Vesna's dream related to aviation. In 1972, at the age of 22, Vesna, a young and dynamic woman, began working as a flight attendant at JAT Airlines. Although the aviation industry was predominantly male at the time, for Vesna, this was about following a dream. Moreover, it was quite rare for women to enter such professional fields in Serbia and former Yugoslavia at the time, making it an even greater challenge for Vesna. Vesna quickly became passionate and dedicated to her work. Being a flight attendant was more than just a job. It turned into a journey that shaped her life. She received advanced flight training and became proficient in many important areas, such as how to serve passengers, emergency procedures, and aircraft safety. With her appearance and grace, Vesna became one of JAT Airlines' respected flight attendants. Furthermore, the strict rules and procedures enforced by the socialist structure of Yugoslavia ensured that airlines paid great attention to safety standards and discipline. As a result, Vesna's training and performance were always based on high standards. Vesna's career was on a fast track. She aimed to progress within the airline industry and dreamed of becoming a cabin manager or executive one day. Her career, which began at a young age, had given her a deep passion for aviation. In addition, her position at JAT Airlines constantly rewarded her with opportunities for travel and exposure to different cultures. For her, being on an airplane was not just a regular job. It was a chance to add color to her life and see a new world. In 1972, during one of Vesna's flights, a tragic event occurred that would change her life forever. At the time, Yugoslavia's political and social structure had a significant impact globally, and flights from Serbia to various European cities were quite frequent. Vesna had participated in many international flights while working at JAT Airlines, always striving to provide excellent service to her passengers. However, January 16, 1972, was the day when her dream career would turn into a massive tragedy. On that day, during a flight, Vesna was caught in the middle of a sudden explosion. The plane fell from 160 meters, and Vesna's life would turn into an accident with no hope of survival. This incident not only made her a personal hero, but also attracted global attention. She would go down in history as the sole survivor of the crash, becoming a symbol of miraculous survival, and the name Vesna Vulović would be forever associated with her extraordinary story of survival. Despite the horrific accident, Vesna Vulović's hope for a career in aviation never diminished. Not only did she physically recover, but she also showed everyone her immense psychological strength. This story became not only a struggle for survival but also a symbol of a person's determination, perseverance, and power. January 16, 1972, was a turning point in Vesna Vulović's life. That day, a routine flight from Belgrade to Zurich aboard a DC-9 aircraft belonging to JAT Yugoslav Airlines marked the beginning of a worldwide tragedy. This flight, which everyone saw as an ordinary journey, held within it a devastating disaster. Vesna Vulović, as usual, was busy serving passengers, but nothing suggested that this day would be extraordinary and terrifying. The plane took off from Belgrade Airport around 1 p.m. The first part of the 2-hour flight went smoothly. Normally, the Belgrade-Zurich route was a frequently flown one, and the plane's crew continued to serve passengers safely. There were 28 passengers and 6 crew members on board. The weather conditions were good, and there were no external factors that suggested any issues with the flight. However, on that day, behind the scenes, a disaster was looming in the sky. As the plane was climbing to about 6,000 meters before descending, a massive explosion occurred. This explosion shocked both the passengers and the crew. However, no one could fully comprehend what was happening before the plane started to break apart. The explosion at 1:45 p.m. caused catastrophic damage to the plane. The source of the explosion was a suitcase carrying explosives in the rear of the aircraft. At that time, such incidents were often linked to terrorist attacks, though no official statement was made about the cause of the explosion. Some sources, however, speculated that a bomb attack took place on the plane. The explosion was so powerful that a large portion of the aircraft's body was completely torn apart, and the remaining sections of the plane suffered severe damage. The outer shell cracked, and the plane began to tumble uncontrollably through the sky. With the intensity of the explosion, the passengers and crew in the right rear of the plane immediately lost their lives. At the same time, the cockpit and other sections of the plane also sustained severe damage. But the most terrifying part was that the plane split in two. Passengers and crew members were quickly ejected from the plane due to the force of gravity. After the explosion, many passengers lost their lives during the fall. However, the only person who survived this disaster and remained alive was Vesna Vulović. After the explosion, Vesna Vulović, her body in a state of severe shock, became trapped inside the cabin as the plane broke apart. At that moment, her chances of survival were almost non-existent. As the plane fell from such a high altitude, it seemed impossible for passengers like Vesna to survive. However, as she fell with the plane at great speed, a miracle occurred. She got trapped in part of the cabin and continued to fall rapidly toward the earth. At that height, surviving a fall from such a plane seemed completely impossible. The plane fell from approximately 1,060 meters, and many experts predicted it would result in certain death. However, the secret behind Vesna Vulović's survival can be explained by a combination of complex weather conditions and structural factors. Despite the plane being torn apart, a large part of the cabin remained relatively intact. During the fall, air currents and the impact on her body, combined with some miraculous factors, allowed her to survive. When the plane crashed into the ground, Vesna was still conscious but had sustained severe injuries. Her body had many fractures, especially in her skull, and significant internal organ damage. Above all, Vesna's survival required immense effort. While no other passengers who fell from the plane survived, Vesna's survival was, at best, described as a miracle. Immediately following this horrific event, authorities launched a massive search and rescue operation. After many hours of searching under difficult conditions, Vesna was pulled from the wreckage of the plane alive. This was not just a chance of survival, but a rare example of a person surviving miraculously after being on the brink of death. Vesna Vulović's survival shocked the world. Many media outlets and experts stated that surviving a fall from such a high altitude was nearly impossible. According to the Guinness World Records, she is recorded as the only person to survive a fall from 10,160 meters. The other passengers and crew members who died were mourned as a great loss. However, at that moment, it wasn't just a plane crash. Vesna's struggle for survival became a historical event, symbolizing how human willpower and luck can come together. After the plane's breakup, there were a series of incredible events behind the terrifying moments Vesna experienced. The plane fell from 10,160 meters, or approximately 33,000 feet, a height from which survival after such a fall was considered impossible. Yet, against all expert predictions, Vesna survived this horrific tragedy and left the world astonished. After the explosion, the rear of the plane was completely torn apart, and most of the passengers and crew began to fall rapidly to the ground with the aircraft. The plane, which had been progressing smoothly at the beginning of the flight, went out of control after the massive explosion, and the lives of the passengers changed in an instant. Vesna suddenly found herself ejected from the plane, plunging into freefall. At that moment, despite the speed of the fall, the coldness of the environment, and the destructive effects of the flight, a miracle would occur that would allow her to survive. Normally, when a plane falls from 10,000 meters, the chances of survival for passengers and everyone on board are considered zero. At that altitude, when the plane enters freefall, the lack of cabin pressure and oxygen, along with the damage to the body, are fatal. However, the extraordinary details of Vesna's fall remain an unsolved mystery for scientists and aviation experts. Many experts believed that falling from such a height would inevitably result in death, but Vesna managed to defy the odds and survive, leaving this event as a miracle. One of the key factors behind Vesna's miraculous survival was the complex weather conditions during the flight. Experts indicate that the fall, after the plane's disintegration, was not a typical freefall, but rather something that defied conventional expectations. Falling at such a high speed was something the human body couldn't survive, yet Vesna landed with part of the cabin intact. This partial protection gave her a significant chance of survival. Normally, when a plane falls from such a height, all the cabin and structural parts would break apart and disappear. However, the cabin Vesna was in provided some accidental protection during the fall. In addition to the plane's structural damage during the fall, air currents played a crucial role in her survival. At that height, the plane was moving much faster than the surrounding atmosphere, and sudden air turbulence could reduce the plane's speed. During the fall, these air currents helped slow her descent a little, and the cabin structure provided a protective zone that helped her land in a more controlled manner, instead of crashing into the ground at a deadly speed. As Vesna fell with the plane's debris, her body endured intense impacts. The items inside the cabin, after the plane's disintegration, were scattered in every direction, causing chaos. During the fall, Vesna's body absorbed multiple impacts and blows. The physical strain of falling at high speed put immense stress on her muscles and bones, causing severe injuries. Yet, strangely, one of the factors that helped her survive the fall was being trapped in the cabin. The airflow around her and the debris acting as a shock-absorbing protective layer played a crucial role in her survival. Although Vesna's body was heavily damaged during the fall, particularly in the head and spinal cord areas, the injuries were not fatal enough to cause her death. Many of her bones were broken, her skull was severely injured, and her body endured numerous impacts. However, remarkably, the shock and trauma that would normally cause death during such a fall did not have a fatal impact on Vesna's body, which was considered another miracle. After the plane and most of the passengers crashed to the ground, Vesna was still alive, but her survival was nothing short of miraculous. At the moment she thought it was all over, she somehow managed to stay conscious. Her body had sustained severe injuries and she was nearly immobile. However, after crashing into the ground, the mystery behind Vesna's survival slowly began to unfold. When rescuers found her in the wreckage, they were astonished to realize she was still alive. Emergency medical teams were immediately called, and Vesna was rushed to the hospital. This astonishing event remained in the media for a long time, and Vesna Vulović wrote one of the most extraordinary survival stories in aviation history. Vesna Vulović's survival after falling from 10,160 meters is considered one of the greatest miracles in aviation history. At that time, surviving an airplane crash was nearly impossible, and many experts believed that falling from such a height offered no chance of survival. However, Vesna's miraculous survival remained an unsolved mystery, defying scientific and logical explanations. The combination of air currents, the disintegration of the cabin, and other structural factors were some of the key elements that allowed Vesna to survive. This tragic event not only made her a survivor but also a hero, showing how strong the human spirit can be. Although Vesna survived the fall from the plane as a miracle, her body was severely injured. When the plane fell from 10,160 meters, the cabin debris that fell with her and the other passengers led to the near destruction of everything. However, Vesna had a great stroke of luck. She got trapped inside a part of the cabin during the fall, and this partial protection saved her life. Despite this, her body sustained severe damage due to the intense impact. Vesna's survival after the fall was considered a medical miracle, but her body was horrifically damaged. Shortly after, when rescue teams retrieved her from the wreckage, they realized that Vesna was conscious but had sustained extreme injuries. She had severe head trauma and fractures in various parts of her body. In particular, the damage to her head and spine was immediately noticeable to the medical teams. Vesna was placed in an ambulance and rushed to the nearest hospital in Belgrade, where she was taken to the intensive care unit. Her condition was critical, and her chances of survival were diminishing with each passing minute. However, Vesna's unwavering hope and strong willpower increased the confidence of the medical teams in her recovery. One of the most serious injuries Vesna sustained was to her head. The force of the explosion and the effects of the fall caused severe damage to her skull. Skull fractures and brain injuries would be some of the greatest obstacles in her fight for survival. Additionally, the damage to her spine left her paralyzed from the waist down. Vesna would no longer be able to live her life in the same active way, facing significant physical limitations. Experts predicted that recovering from such an injury would be extremely difficult, and Vesna would undergo a long rehabilitation process. At first, Vesna's condition appeared hopeless. The trauma to her head and the fractures throughout her body, along with the paralysis and internal injuries, required an immense medical effort. However, the medical team saw a glimmer of hope. The fact that someone could survive such severe injuries meant there was a possibility for recovery. A 10-hour surgery was immediately scheduled, which would serve as a last chance to save her life. During the surgery, efforts were made to treat the wounds on her head and the fractures in her spine. The doctors worked hard to repair the damage to her skull. Additionally, all necessary surgical interventions were performed to address the spinal injuries. After the surgery, Vesna's chances of survival improved significantly. However, the recovery process would be long and challenging. After the surgery, Vesna's condition began to stabilize. But this was only the first step. A long treatment process awaited her, with every kind of support needed for her to regain her strength. Physical therapy played a crucial role due to her spinal injuries. Slowly, Vesna's body began to respond to the treatment. Gradually, efforts were made to create harmony between her mind and body. At the same time, the psychological effects Vesna experienced were an important part of the treatment process. Surviving such a horrific crash required much more than just physical recovery. The long rehabilitation journey was not only about physical healing, but also about healing emotionally and mentally. Throughout the treatment process, Vesna remained strong. With the support of her family and the determination of the medical team, she continued to heal. Over time, Vesna's health began to improve. She started to regain her strength physically and mentally, but the effects of the accident would continue to impact her life. The injuries to her head and body made daily life difficult for her. Due to her paralysis, Vesna began using a wheelchair. However, as time passed and her recovery process progressed, she became physically stronger. Still, her life would never be the same again. Despite everything, Vesna Vulović managed to move forward with her life, facing each challenge head-on. Over time, her struggle became not just about surviving, but about holding on to life as a strong person once again. In a sense, Vesna had emerged stronger not only from the fall of the plane but from every challenge life had thrown at her. After the horrific crash, Vesna began her fight against paralysis and severe injuries. Following the fall, she had to undergo long-term treatment in the hospital. After a successful surgery, she managed to survive, but the road to recovery was long and arduous. The healing process, which began with paralysis, eventually turned into a miraculous transformation. After Vesna was taken to the hospital, doctors diagnosed her with paralysis. The head and spinal trauma she sustained in the crash left her with a life of forced immobility. She was paralyzed from the waist down, which not only affected her physically, but also caused significant psychological trauma. Losing bodily mobility after such a major trauma can lead to an emotional breakdown. Vesna, confined to a hospital bed for a long period, began to feel the effects of this trauma. However, her greatest strength was her inner determination and will to survive. Her goal was not just to survive, but also to become independent again. Overcoming these psychological challenges could have posed a major obstacle to her physical recovery. However, Vesna fought through the difficulties caused by the trauma to her head and became stronger with each passing day. With the support of her medical team and family, she continued her recovery without losing motivation. Vesna's recovery process began slowly and carefully. At first, only small steps were possible. Her body slowly began to move, and her muscles started to function again. For a paralyzed person, these early steps were incredibly important. However, doctors and therapists ensured that Vesna kept going with the treatment, never losing hope. Intensive physical therapy was used to stimulate her muscles and regain her ability to move. Initially, Vesna could only move a few centimeters. However, as days passed, improvements in her leg muscles and spinal region gave her the momentum to begin moving again. Over time, her body became strong enough to take bigger steps and activate her muscles. This process was not just a physical victory, but also a mental one. The treatment that had begun with paralysis gradually allowed her to walk again. One of the most critical moments of Vesna's recovery was when she regained the ability to walk. She had been taken to the hospital paralyzed and had started a long treatment process, but like a miracle, she regained her mobility. Thanks to physical therapy sessions and continuous moral support, Vesna's legs began to function again. After a long rehabilitation process, when she took her first steps, it was a significant victory for both Vesna and those around her. Vesna's ability to walk again caused a great stir in the medical world and among the public. Many people saw her miraculous recovery as a triumph not just of medicine, but of human willpower and the desire to live. At that moment, she proved to people how powerful it is not just to survive, but to hold on to life and achieve success once again. This moment revealed not only her physical strength, but also her mental fortitude. Vesna Vulovic's miraculous recovery was followed with great attention, not only in the medical world but also worldwide. People were deeply interested in her survival story. Every stage of her recovery process became global news. Vesna's ability to walk again after beginning her treatment paralyzed was described as a miracle all over the world. Many saw her recovery as a story that symbolizes the value of life and the power of human will. The media widely shared Vesna's determination and perseverance during her recovery process. Many doctors and experts studying her treatment developed new perspectives and methods for recovery. Vesna's healing journey became an example not just of one person's fight to cling to life, but of how science and human will can come together to create miracles. Vesna's recovery was not only a physical triumph but also a story that renewed a society's belief in the human spirit. She became a symbol of how human beings should push their limits and never give up, showing that the success of a paralyzed patient's treatment was more than just medical recovery. It was about resilience and the refusal to surrender. Her success inspired countless people, and she became recognized as not only physically healed but also as a social hero. People accepted Vesna's story not just as a miracle, but as a representation of resistance against life's challenges. Vesna Vulovic's miraculous recovery went beyond just physical effort and medical intervention. It was a victory of the human will. Her battle for survival culminated in her regaining the ability to walk, marking the end of the process that began with paralysis. Her story helped people rediscover their inner strength and passion for life. This globally followed event was not just a survival story but also a symbol of life and the power of the human spirit. Vesna Vulovic's survival story transformed from a mere accident to a symbol of inner strength, life's desire, and miracles. The horrific event she experienced in 1972 etched her name in history. Her story showed not just survival, but how a person could resist challenges and cling to life with determination. This turning point in her life made her a worldwide hero. However, Vesna accepted all the fame and awards that came after the crash with humility. Vesna Vulovic's survival after falling from 10,160 meters became a historic event in both the medical world and the aviation industry. It resonated worldwide. After this incredible survival story, Vesna entered the Guinness World Records. After the 1972 crash, it seemed impossible for anyone to survive such a high-altitude fall. Experts said that surviving such a fall was scientifically impossible, but Vesna disproved those beliefs and showed how great a miracle survival truly is. Vesna's record was not only a success in survival, but also a symbol of the powerful fight against human will and nature. After her survival, global analyses and studies praised her as a great hero. This miraculous survival story became a legend in both the aviation world and society at large. After Vesna's survival, major figures in aviation expressed their respect for her. All airlines admired her not just for her physical survival, but also for her psychological strength after such a catastrophe. Vesna became a symbol in the aviation industry. Many airlines awarded her special honors, and grand ceremonies were held to commemorate her struggle and the families of those who lost their lives and the other victims of the event. After Vesna became known as a global hero, many saw her as a symbol of survival. Her story contributed to an increased awareness of survival and safety. After the crash, studies on aviation safety grew, and people began paying more attention to preventing accidents, which was a direct effect of Vesna's survival. However, despite the tragedy she experienced and the numerous awards she received, Vesna Vulovic always remained humble. Her humility formed another dimension of her story. Vesna never accepted the great respect and awards given to her with pride. She saw this tragic event as more than just another accident. For her, it was beyond a mere fight for survival. In the years following the crash, she gave speeches about how valuable survival and starting anew were, understanding the pain and challenges she had gone through better than anyone else. Vesna knew that after the crash, people saw her as a hero, but she always viewed the meaning of survival and achieving such a significant success as walking again from a broader perspective. For her, this event symbolized not only surviving physically, but also a rebirth emotionally. Every moment she lived after the crash felt like a new beginning. Therefore, the transformation of the accident into a heroic story was intertwined with the way her tragedy and strength inspired others. Vesna Vulovic's story gained even greater significance after 1972, transcending just being about a plane crash. Her struggle for survival helped countless people around the world cope with challenges they faced. People wrote countless books about her miraculous story, and films and documentaries were made. This was much more than a survival story. It carried a universal message of the value of persevering in life, regardless of the circumstances, and confronting every challenge head-on. Vesna Vulovic's survival story was shared around the world. In a sense, she became a symbol not only of falling from a plane, but also of the resistance against the difficulties faced by humanity. Her story became a lesson that one should never lose hope, and that life should be lived with an awareness of its value every moment. Vesna Vulovic's survival story was not just about surviving a plane crash, it was a victory of the human spirit, belief, and determination. Her life symbolized the strength of will to endure against any calamity, and the power needed to survive. After the event, she became known as the only person to survive the highest fall ever, and this became a miracle, etched in history. However, despite reaching this point after the crash, she always remained humble and sought to understand life deeply beyond the monumental event. Her survival story will be remembered for generations as an inspiring tale of heroism worldwide.